In this video, we're going to talk all about tight pecs and some of my go-to exercises for not only improving flexibility of the muscles in the front of the shoulder, but also making that flexibility last long term. Ever since I've gotten into lifting, I've struggled with tight pecs, primarily because I would never go through the full range of motion in shoulder extension, shoulder abduction, scapular retraction with a lot of my exercise selection. I would do a lot of heavy bench press where the arms would just stop here, and I wouldn't really do too much pec stretching. So when I'm in my teenage years training hard, my muscles adapted to become very stiff. So when I started getting into some gymnastic strength training, I had to work really hard to develop this flexibility as an adult. And I'm going to show you some of my favorite exercises I've used along the way. Whether you have actually reduced flexibility in the pecs, or they just simply feel tight, and you need to build strength through your range of motion, these exercises are going to be very beneficial for you. And if you want to see how I structure these flexibility exercises into a weekly plan, then I highly suggest you check out my Supple Shoulders program on my website. It's going to lay it all out for you, how many sets, how many reps, and how you can integrate this with other flexibility exercises for the whole entire shoulder. When I say tight pecs, I'm referring to two muscles, the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. The pectoralis minor sits underneath the pec major. Now the pec major will connect from your sternum to the humerus. So motions of the arm actually influence the flexibility of the pec major, whereas the pec minor attaches to the scapula. So motions of the scapula are going to influence the flexibility of the pec minor. What we have to understand about both of these muscles is that the position of the rib cage is going to influence how the scapula and the humerus move as a unit. So if I have a stuck thoracic spine in flexion and it can't rotate, then you can see how it's going to be very difficult for the humerus to move. The pecs are primarily going to be adductors of the humerus, okay, especially the pectoralis major. It's also going to assist in shoulder flexion as well and internal rotation. So in order to stretch the pec major, we're going to need some humeral abduction. This is horizontal abduction. We're going to need some external rotation at the humerus, and we're going to need the scapula to retract. Now, if we want to stretch the pec minor, we're going to need the scapula to tip posteriorly, because a contraction of the pectoralis minor will tip the scapula forward, and we also need a retraction of the scapula. But how do you know if you actually have reduced flexibility? We're going to go through three different tests. First, starting with horizontal abduction, then humeral external rotation, and then we'll get into thoracic rotation, and we'll see how reduced thoracic rotation and extension can lead to reduced range of motion through horizontal abduction. The first test is horizontal abduction of the shoulder, which is essentially testing the length of the pecs in the frontal plane. The idea is to drop the arm toward the ground without allowing the thoracic spine to rotate to that same side. As soon as we see any rib cage motion whatsoever, or the opposite shoulder comes off the bench, then the test is over. We're also going to want to compare this to the thoracic rotation assessment, which we'll see here, because they do have a relationship. Get on all fours, sit your butt back toward the heel with one elbow touching the knee, and then you're going to open up the chest toward the ceiling, allowing the eyes to follow the elbow, and then take note of side-to-side differences. What's interesting to note is we'll typically see a tighter pec on the side where it's easier to rotate the thoracic spine to, because that's typically a compensation pattern we'll see for limited horizontal abduction of the shoulder. And lastly, we'll assess external rotation of the humerus, which can also influence how much space the pec has to move through the transverse plane. As we drop the hand toward the ground, we do not want to see any excess motion of the rib cage. We don't want to overextend the spine either. Ideally, we should see 90 degrees of external rotation here without any rib cage or elbow movement. The first exercise is the wall thoracic rotation with a hip shift. This is a super simple but extremely effective setup that you can do almost anywhere. And if you do have limited thoracic rotation on one side or both sides, you're going to want to do this drill first in the series. So get as close as you can to the wall, and you're going to use a push-pull mechanism of the hand where you take your opposite hand, put it on the outside of your inside leg, and then you're going to push your thoracic spine into rotation with the hand that's flat on the wall. The method we're going to use here is contract relax, where we take a big inhale through the nose, push the hand into the outside of the thigh as if we're rotating away, and then as we exhale, we can move into more thoracic rotation. Now, when we relax and go deeper, we don't have to just move through more thoracic rotation via the rib cage, but we can also shift the knee forward, the side that's closest to the wall. If we think about pulling the opposite leg back while shifting that knee forward, we can create more thoracic rotation without even moving the rib cage. One compensation I'd look out for is overly retracting the scapula to fake thoracic rotation. We're going to want to maintain some bit of scapular protraction, which will further dissociate the scapula from the thoracic spine. As we protract the scapula and rotate to that same side, we get those two bones moving in opposing directions, which will improve thoracic rotation. And here I'm overly retracting, which is what we don't want to do. So after that drill, we should test our thoracic spine rotation to the side we were most limited on, and we should see a decent improvement. The purpose of this next drill is to improve end range strength in external rotation while we're in our deepest pec stretch. We're going to set up facing the ground with the elbow angle at 90 degrees and elevated on a foam block. Rotate the lower trunk away, using the opposite hand to push you into more of a pec stretch. Now from here, we're going to lift the hand of the stretching side off the ground into external rotation. If we're really at our end range, we should barely be getting that hand off the ground. As we maximally fire those rotator cuff muscles in this lengthened position of the pecs, it's going to reflexively allow us to move deeper into a pec stretch. This is known as reciprocal inhibition. So as we lift the hand off the ground, we might have to come out of end range just slightly, as you can see here. And then once we place the hand back down on the ground, it's going to allow us to rotate further into the stretch. It's important to elevate that elbow at first, because if we're truly at our end range, we're not going to be able to display maximal strength through external rotation in this shortened range. And of course, over time, we can progress by taking that block away and performing these liftoffs already at 90 degrees of humeral external rotation. If we're doing multiple sets of this exercise, maybe on the first set, we're going to use that block elevation, second set as well, and then perhaps on the third set, we can take away the block because we've created enough range to actually achieve some liftoff with the elbow on the ground. For most people, this exercise is going to tick off a lot of boxes in terms of creating more pec length through horizontal abduction, but next we're going to look at shoulder extension. As we know, the pecs are shoulder flexors, so to stretch them in the sagittal plane, we're going to want to extend the shoulder. Reverse planks are some of the best variations for improving flexibility of the pecs through shoulder extension. Progression number 1 will be this tabletop bridge, where we keep the knees bent and thrust our hips forward toward the ceiling. Now, once we can get the hips in line with the shoulders with a shoulder width hand grip, then we can progress to straight legs. This is going to lengthen the lever a bit, which is going to increase the challenge of the shoulder extensor muscles. During this drill, we should feel the triceps and the posterior deltoids firing extremely hard to pull us into a deeper stretch. So not only is it a great drill to lengthen the pecs, but also to strengthen those triceps to pull us into more shoulder extension. Once we have developed some capacity with the feet on the floor, we can elevate the feet. And we can keep elevating the feet until the feet are higher than the hips. But again, we want to make sure we're getting the hips level with the shoulders. If you notice one side feels more restricted, then a great drill to do is the single arm shoulder extension stretch. Now with the straight arm variation, we are going to be stretching the distal bicep to a degree. So with this isolation drill, feel free to bend the elbow to get more of the pec involved. So set up in a comfortable level of shoulder extension with the fingers facing backwards, retract the scapula, and then we're going to rotate the knees to the opposite side, and you're going to feel a nice lengthening through the pec on that stretching side. Contract relax intervals work great here, where I pull the palm forward as if I'm performing a bicep curl or a pec fly, and then I'm going to relax, and I can either scoot my butt forward more, or I can rotate the knees further away from the stretching side. And that rotation away of the pelvis and the lower trunk to the opposite side is going to drag the rib cage along with it. So we're stretching through some of that horizontal abduction as we're moving through shoulder extension. So we are getting a nice stretch of the pecs through multiple planes. So again, the cues are contracting and relaxing as if we're trying to do a bicep curl, and then relaxing by either scooting the hips forward or rotating the knees more to the side, or you could do a little bit of both. This last drill is called the hanging inlocate, and while it seems like it's one of the more advanced drills, it's actually quite accessible as long as you are doing it correctly. The pec muscles are actually scapular depressors, so to stretch them through scapular elevation, it helps to get a traction force going, and we can do that in hanging. So with this drill, we want to set up in a wide grip, wider than we think is going to be effective, just so we can get the technique right, and over time we can move the hand grip in. So we're going to start in a fully internally rotated shoulder position with the palms facing backward. This is called an eagle hang. The idea is to push through the bar and drive the hips upwards to transition through to a full pec stretch. So the shoulder is going to move through internal and external rotation while we're hanging. When I initiate the pull, my hips move backwards and up. This is going to create the necessary space for the shoulder to rotate through in the socket. We also want to make sure we're starting from a full hang so we fully get that traction force going. One of the biggest mistakes is people just try to jut their chest forward like this, and they end up feeling impinged and stuck in the shoulder. And this is because the scapula doesn't have room to retract, elevate, and upwardly rotate to allow the space for the humerus to rotate fully through the socket. And as we progress, we can do these with less and less foot support until we're doing them in free hanging, but honestly, it's not necessary and you can get most of the benefits with the foot supported. Okay guys, that's the video. If you try any of these exercises, let me know in the comments. And again, if you want a structured plan to build some serious shoulder flexibility, then check out my Supple Shoulders program. Link is in the description.